and welcome to today's webinar entitled Nothing to Sneeze At, Addressing the Impact of Allergies on Building Occupants. I'm Ann Cosgrove, the Editor-in-Chief of Facility Executive Magazine, and this webinar today is presented by AeraMax Professional, so thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. Please note the control panel that's on your screen. This is where you can submit questions in that question box in the panel. Please send your questions in for our speaker at any time, and we will address them after the presentation. Also, please note the orange arrow on the left side of that panel. Clicking on that arrow will either expand or collapse the panel, so please be sure it is expanded so you can access the question box. Also, you can use that question box to send us any other types of questions, including if you're having a technical difficulty or any other housekeeping items, and we'll address those right away. So I'd like to introduce your speaker today, Jeff Dreifelt. Jeff is Vice President of Global Branding and Air Treatment at AeraMax Professional. And over the past 20 years, he has served in various marketing and innovation leadership capacities in organizations such as Quaker Oats, Conagra Foods, Sara Lee, and now Fellows. He's an MBA graduate of Pepperdine University, and Jeff also serves as an adjunct professor at his alma mater, Trinity Christian College, where he does serve on the school's Business Advisory Council. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Jeff. Welcome, Jeff.
Great, thanks, Ann, and thanks everyone for joining today to hear a presentation specifically on the air and nothing to sneeze at, addressing the impact of allergies on building occupants. And so look forward to the next little time that we're going to spend together. And so with that, let's get moving. So the primary learning objectives that we have for this presentation is really a couple. Understanding what factors really contribute to allergies and asthma issues in the office or in a building. Secondly is what other common indoor air contaminants really impact allergies on building occupants, and then specifically what can you do about it, right? What is the development actionable plans to eliminate those sick days, boost the productivities, and ensure that everybody is going to be in good shape in their buildings. So those are the three primary objectives that we have for today. So with that, we've got a poll question. Andy,
we do. Thanks, Jeff. Yes, sorry. Yes, we do. So we'll ask you out in the audience to please take a moment to answer this question that you see up on the screen, and that's, do your building occupants suffer from asthma or allergies? Yes, no, or you're not sure? Please just take a moment to choose an answer, and we will share the results with you in a few moments. Okay, so I think we'll see those results in a moment, and there we go. Yes, building occupants do suffer from asthma or allergies, according to our attendees today, 80%. And followed by 2% no, 17% are not sure. So there you go. Thanks for voting, and back to you, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So yeah, do building occupants suffer from allergy and asthma? So 8 out of 10 of you said yes, they do, and that's actually pretty common that we've heard as well, is that this is an issue that most of the people that are coming into your buildings are dealing with. And you know, one of the questions is building occupant owners, managers, and those that are responsible for the wellness of those that are in the building, what are we doing about it? What are we doing about this this type of dynamic where it's resulting in hitting a vast amount of the people that are walking in the building? So first and foremost, what is allergy? What is an allergy? Let's define it here. So an allergy is really a reaction of the body to a previous encountered allergen introduced by inhalation, injection, skin contact. And what happens? You get itchy eyes, runny nose, wheezing, skin rash, diarrhea. So what's happening here, what I called out is allergy is something that can be triggered by an inhalation, right? Things that you're breathing in. And so as you're breathing in pollen, as you're breathing in ragweed, dust mites, things like that, the body's having a reaction to that, and that's an allergic reaction to the body. Your body is countering that. And if any of you, on the phone have allergies or have maybe loved ones or coworkers that have allergies, you just know how miserable that makes you feel and how unproductive you certainly can be. On the other side, let's talk about asthma and really just kind of defining what that is and how that differs from an allergy. Well, an asthma is something ongoing. It's a chronic lung disorder that's really marked by recurring episodes of something happening to your airways. Your airways are being obstructed, and what's happening is it's labored breathing, wheezing, coughing, and a sense of constriction triggered by hyperreactivity to various stimuli, allergens. So an allergy is a reaction to something that you're inhaling. An asthma condition is you have an ongoing chronic condition of which something that you breathe in triggers. So in either case, the quality of the air is so important because of what you're breathing in can actually trigger an asthmatic reaction or an allergic reaction. So I think it's just really important to kind of highlight the differences between those two. And so allergies and asthma are really common. And as you guys even mentioned, some numbers here, at least 1 in 5 people do suffer from some sort of allergy. And then 1 in 10 children today actually have asthma. And what we're seeing is that number is growing more and more. So this is very, very common, is allergies and asthma. It's very typical within organizations. But what are we as organizations doing to ensure that we're providing the cleanest facilities and avoiding any allergic or asthmatic reactions? And why it's important, why we think about it, is work-related asthma is one of the most prevalent occupational lung diseases and issues that's around. And as mentioned before, what we've seen over the last 10 years is about 160% increase in kids being diagnosed with asthma. So as you're in schools, you've certainly seen this firsthand, but also as you're, if you've got a business, more and more people that are coming into your business, more and more of your employees are going to be more sensitive to the air because they have an asthmatic condition, or at least sensitive to that. And so that's been just a dramatic increase over time in the years. The more and more I speak with superintendents of schools and education, they are seeing this ongoing. There's actually additional laws that are being created up in Canada around being able to have asthmatic inhalers available, cleaning the air, because they've seen so much of asthma-related diagnoses happening with kids in the schools up there. So this is a very real and emerging thing that is happening. So allergies and asthma, I think what's important here as we think about this is that we spend so much of our time indoors, right? We spend about 90% of all of our time indoors. And the thing is, the indoor air is actually more polluted than the outdoor air. That's something that we don't think about a lot. We also, when we're indoors, we spend our time with other people, right? We're spending our time at least 9 hours in what we're calling shared spaces. These are spaces that you're sharing with other occupants, right? Think about your business, think about a classroom, a conference room, workstations, offices, things like that. And the other side about allergies and asthma is we all breathe, right? This is something that's very important to all of us and very relevant to us. So everybody breathes. We spend a lot of time indoors, and we spend a lot of that time with others. So very important as we think about allergies and asthma. And as we think about the daily consumption of items in our life, think about what we put into our bodies, right? And so think about water. On average, Americans drink 2.5 cups of water a day. So we put a lot of thought into the quality, the purity of the water that we drink, right? It's very different than it was 20 years ago. The emergence of bottled water, the common mainstream of filtered water, things of that nature. So it's very important to us to ensure what we're taking in is in its cleanliness. The other side of that is food, right? So if we think about water, we think about food. On average, we have about just under 5 pounds of food a day. And the way we eat certainly has changed. We know more now about the quality and the purity and the localization of food. We try to not eat processed because we know that processed food has added things to it, added impurities to it that we don't want. So we spend a lot of time, effort, money, and focus in what we put in our bodies, because what we put in our bodies has a direct correlation to our wellness and our health and our productivity and our happiness. Well, the zone that we don't necessarily think about is air. And on average, every American takes in about 3,000 gallons of air a day. So following the same logic is the quality of what you consume directly correlates to your wellness and health. The same absolutely holds true with air, but we don't think necessarily about air. And unlike food and water, where you have a choice, you can make your own decisions on what you want to purchase, what kind of food and drink that you put into your body. That's not necessarily the case with air, right? So when someone enters your facility, everyone's breathing the same quality of air. You don't have a choice to breathe different types of air. So it puts a huge amount of responsibility on the indoor air quality for the organizations that we're part of. Okay? So with that, the impact of allergies and asthma, what role does that play? Well, as I mentioned before, indoor air is 2 to 5 times more polluted than the outdoor air. Well, what we mean by that is most of the time when you think about air and dirty air, you think about air pollution, right? That's what makes the news. But what happens is, building air is you bring in that outside air. But why the indoor air is certainly dirtier is the fact that there's people in the buildings, and people are the ones that make things dirty, right? They bring in their germs, they bring in their viruses, they bring in pollen, they bring in ragweed, that is on their clothing and things like that. And as we get into the buildings, all of the air, basically, and all of that material that's in the building stays inside. It's being trapped inside the building. And so, therefore, if the building air is not being purified or cleaned, it just gets dirtier and dirtier ongoing, okay? And it's very key. And that's especially key knowing that allergies are the 6th leading cause of chronic illness in the U.S. and work-related asthma, is such a big deal, right? And what happens is that those with allergies and asthma trigger absenteeism, right? Absenteeism is not being able to present, not being able to go to school, not being able to go to work. And in each year, in the U.S., the airborne allergy and asthma triggers cause, just from allergy and asthma, 16 million school absences, 14 million lost work days, and a ton of money because of sick days and lost productivity. And so again, this is something super important for us to really understand is not only there's a health and safety element, but there's also a big financial one that's associated here. So some other things to think about is that the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, estimates that about 50% of the nation's schools do have air quality problems, right? And why would that be? Well, many schools are actually, and think about it if you don't have if you're not responsible for schools, think about your businesses as well, right? Many businesses and schools are close to busy roads and industry. As we take air quality measurements, any location that is closer to a street, major highway, things like that, they're getting more airborne contaminant because that's coming off of the exhaust from cars. The cars are kicking up dirt and things like that, and that's making its way into the different buildings in the surrounding area. Air quality problems would also be driven by trying to be clean, right, with chemicals. So many of the chemicals in buildings and cleaning products are actually contributing to air quality problems because many of the products that are being used have VOCs in them that do then make their way into the air and can cause some problems. And then lastly is aging school facilities or aging buildings. So if you work in older buildings, the ventilation system, the airflow within those systems, one, may not be optimal, and two, they might not be clean, quite frankly. And so with that being the case, there's a real big challenge that we have as an organization with air quality problems that are out there. So what contributes to triggering those allergies and asthma? And it's a lot of things that can happen here. There's a lot of common indoor contaminants that trigger that. One is airborne bacteria and viruses. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, the influenza virus is actually the #1, through the air, influenza is the #1 way of catching the flu virus is actually through the air. So that's pretty significant. Allergens are certainly in the air. If you've ever seen, if you ever walk by a window and you see the sunlight kind of peering through and you see the things that are floating in the air, it makes that invisible visible. It's quite concerning. And, many of the allergens certainly are there. VOCs can also cause allergies and asthma. That's called a volatile organic compound. And what happens is things like paint, cleaning supplies, even copy machines and fax machines, they're giving off carbon-based vapors, which can negatively influence your breathing and your respiratory. And then lastly is just odors overall. Different types of odors and fragrances can certainly trigger an asthmatic condition. And as mentioned before, peering through the window and seeing all that fun stuff that's flying through there, a lot of that actually is dust. And dust mites may be the most common cause of year-round allergy and asthma, says the Asthma Allergy Foundation of America. Every building, no matter how clean, is going to have things like dust making its way around, and that certainly can cause some triggers of issues. So dust makes up about 25% of all allergic diseases, and about half to more of all the asthma cases are actually dust-related. So you think about being allergic to ragweed and pollen and things like that, but dust is actually one of the most prominent things to be allergic to. And these are all round, year-round concerns. Certainly in the spring and the fall, you're going to see a significant increase in the amount of prescription ads around allergic medication that take place, your Claritin and things like that. But as you think about, there's items that are year-round, such as indoor mold, right? You get too much moisture that's within your building, dust mites, pet danders, and yes, the lovely cockroaches, and what they leave behind, and is something that is causing significant issues around triggering asthmatic conditions. And what's happening is that allergies are on the rise. Some of the climate change is actually making some plants grow faster, resulting in longer seasons for having allergic conditions. Ozone and CO2 levels that feed allergy-producing plants are certainly on the rise, and ragweed pollen becomes more of a problem with increasing carbon dioxide. So just more and more increasing of those types of issues. As mentioned before, pollen and other common allergens can be brought in indoors from simple things like an open window, but also your HVAC system, right? Your heating, ventilating, air conditioning system does bring outdoor air in. They try mostly to filter that at times, but many times that we've seen it's quite ineffective. But even just people, again, contaminating the area just by walking, coming in based on their clothes, bags, things that are out there. Maybe it's even plants that people are having inside the facility. Now, air pollution. Air pollution is one of those areas that does trigger asthma and allergies as well. And what I've got here is actually a map that is from a NASA satellite. And what this is doing is taking an image of the United States, obviously. And what it's doing is it's measuring and showing the density of the amount of dirt or particulate matter that is in the air. So blue is good, red is bad. Anything light blue, yellow, orange is very bad. And so what you're seeing here is there's a lot of concentration of basically dirty air around a lot of urban areas, right? A lot of cities. And then in the Midwest, you see a lot of industry that's taking place there. You also see the role of how topography or the mountainous, the topography of the land and the mountain ranges that are there, like in the California and the Valley, how the air gets trapped because of the makeup of the ground. And so that's a very big deal. And so the World Health Organization shows that an acceptable level is at 10. And as you can see, there's many cases around the U.S. where it's on average quite high, and in many cases double what the World Health Organization says is safe. Odors are also a big issue with allergy and asthma. And what happens when something stinks? Typically, what do? We mask it, right? We create an aerosol solution. We have candles. We've got sprays. We've got automatic sprays that take place. But what's happening is that's just adding more contaminant to the air and can trigger asthma and asthmatic reactions with individuals, right? Anything too perfumey, too fragrancy certainly can do that. And by the way, it's actually not getting rid of the odor. So it's actually just covering up the odor. So it's not really cleaning anything more here. Many of those things that we mentioned before around VOCs is there's a tremendous amount of them as well that take place. And a lot of the cleaning agents and the aerosols that are out there have that. If you've heard of sick building syndrome, this is something that is happening because of VOCs. And you can't smell VOCs, you can't taste them. But if you've got people in your organization that constantly have headaches or asthma or different attacks, it may be because of a volatile organic compound. And volatile organic compounds are in lots and lots of things. So yeah, those three zones are important. And what's interesting, the VOCs come in a lot of different forms: paints, printers and fax machines, composite woods. If you've got old, composite wood desks, cabinets, things like that, you don't remember where you got it from. Depending on where you bought it from and the type of quality wood that's there, that could be emitting a VOC. Older carpeting, linoleum, and even fiberglass insulation, which may be behind the wall. All of these have been shown to give off VOCs. So certainly something you want to check. And if you're ever doing any remodeling, ensure that you are remodeling and putting in non-VOC type of items. So many people aren't thinking about that. So we know about like the triggers and what is contributing to most of these issues, but what's the ROI of improving indoor air quality and reducing some of those triggers? Well, there's a lot of kind of key zones here that are real big benefits of cleaning the air. One is just around improving productivity, and like you said before, you eat right, you drink right, you breathe right, you're going to be more productive. And the best way to be more productive is to not be sick, right? To show up to work. So reducing absenteeism, avoiding being unproductive is key. The benefits of clean air, it also improves your facility perceptions, right? The ability to know that you're showing care and concern to all those that walk into your building to say we're proactively cleaning to ensure that you don't get sick. Reducing the complaints, we all want less of an email inbox of people complaining because of any air-related matters of complaints there. But then just overall, it's the right thing to do, to create a more positive, health-focused, type of environment here. And improving productivity, there's been many studies out there, and there's one study that was done that showed workers that were breathing clean, purified air versus non-purified air. And workers scored up to 21% higher in cognitive assessments in places with cleaner indoor air quality. And really, that shouldn't surprise us, right? It's kind of the analogy of if you eat bad, you're going to perform worse. So that's the same deal, kind of garbage in, garbage out. And the same hold true for consumption of air. Reducing absenteeism, improving the indoor air quality can keep people healthier, right? Why? Because we are cleaning out those triggers that are making people have allergic and asthmatic reactions. And the cost of sick days can be pretty substantial. It can be up to $3,000 per employee. Multiply that times the number of employees you have within your organization, and that's a big deal. It's lost productivity, it's lost quality, maybe inefficiencies that take place because someone else has to cover for you. So it's a really big deal. So last flu season, how effective was that flu shot in preventing the contraction of the flu virus? You've got 19%, 33, 50, 84%. It's something that I always kind of joke around with people is when they're getting the flu shot, which is that time of year, by the way. How effective was it? Well, it was only 19% effective last year. And the reason why, as you guys can imagine, is one, it's always guessing the type of strain that the flu is going to be, and it's hoping that we can hit it. Well, what happened in the last years is that the flu virus actually mutated. And so what ended up happening there was the medicine that was created in the flu was just ineffective. And here's the other side: is about 50% of people don't even get the flu shot. So overall, it just becomes a big question mark on how effective actually is the flu shot in general. And so we talk about reducing the flu. It's a big deal. Up to about 20% of U.S. residents have the flu. And the flu claims a lot of hospitalizations. It has a lot of lost work days and a lot of missed days of school. And so, it's something that we want to, address. And how are we getting the flu? And what's happening here is that the flu, when someone talks, as someone sneezes, as I'm talking right now, there are droplets that I can't even see that are coming out of my mouth. And the large or small ones, as we sneeze or cough, do land on surfaces, right? And they do land on high touch points, like your hands and your doorknobs and phones and things like that. So it's really important for us to ensure that we are washing surfaces. But the most infectious droplets are the ones that remain suspended in the air, right? So as I sneeze in one room, I walk out, an hour later, someone walks into that same room, they're going to be breathing in the infectious nuclei that is still in the air. And these are so small that they can remain suspended in the air for hours and hours on end. Some studies have them over 6 hours can remain suspended in the air, especially in the winter months when there's drier air that take place. And so that's a big deal. And HVAC systems, the heating and venting systems, what they're actually doing is they're taking in those infectious droplets as someone's sneezing in one room, and it's accelerating that and spreading that in the rest of the organization using the HVAC systems. So that's a big problem. So what happens is droplets from one sneeze can contaminate entire rooms, stay in the air, and even get distributed throughout an organization very, very quickly. And so just knowing that is absolutely key. We got to be able to clean that. Improving the facility sections is another kind of area that we want to do. Is a first impression never dies, right? When you come to an organization and you've got hand sanitizers, you've got efforts that you proactively take into to say we're going to clean the air. It helps raise awareness to the air quality and the fact that the air quality is important and we're actively cleaning it. So as we think about the air, let's talk specifically about the restroom air, right? restrooms are a constant area of contamination. And for obvious reasons, I won't get into that. But think about it. It's an area that is people are always going to. Everybody uses the restroom in your facility, and they're using it anywhere from 4 to 6 times a day. And as related to school, and we've seen the same studies with businesses as well, is that 65% of students, 65% of employees, agree that restrooms shape perceptions of your school. And then even at the student side, 6 out of 10 students reported having to avoid going to school restrooms altogether, despite needing to use the facilities. And we've seen the same taking place at work too. If you don't have a clean bathroom, if you don't have the perception of clean, it's something that people are certainly avoiding. We also want to reduce complaints with improving indoor air. Getting a lot of complaints around allergies, asthma, odors, things of that nature. And so we want to be able to certainly reduce that by cleaning the air. So what we say and what we really believe here is for a truly clean facility, you have to be able to clean the air, right? So cleaning the air is something that is complementary to what you're already doing. Your facility is already taking efforts to clean bathrooms, clean surfaces, clean doorknobs, take out the trash, do the vacuuming, right? Employees hand sanitization stations, encouraging people to wash their hands. All of that is very important. We need to keep doing that because remember, those droplets do land on surfaces and hands. However, we've got to be able to clean the air. So a total clean solution includes clean surfaces and clean air. Absolutely. So how do we effectively clean the air? The first thing is to clean green, right? So checking the type of cleaning chemicals that are using right now is minimizing the usage of anything that's VOC contained. And if you don't know, check. Check to see what sort of cleaning chemicals you're using and what they look like. As we talked about with VOCs, what are those materials, building and office materials that you have? Are they old? Do we need to check whether or not those have any VOCs specifically on them? Okay. And what we'd also say is don't rely specifically on heating and air conditioning. The HVAC is designed to temperature control, right? The reason why we have a furnace and an air conditioner is to make things hot, to make things cold, and to move air around. They're not designed to clean the air, and in fact, your HVAC systems are responsible for distributing germs throughout an organization specifically. So that's a key piece. So what we say is rather than just moving the germs around, let's get rid of the germs. Let's get rid of the allergy and asthma triggers that are taking place and applying air purification to improve your indoor air quality in really those problem areas. And generally what I would say is those problem areas are generally those areas where you've got the most people. Follow where most of the people are, right? And that's why one of the first places we always say is restrooms, right? Everyone is going to restrooms and going there many times throughout the day. And so air purification is key because purification removes rather than redistributes the vast majority of airborne air pollutions, right? Think about your water purification, right? This is about removing the impurities from the water so that you get water in its purest form. The same thing is with air. It's removing the impurities of the air so that you're getting the air in its purest form. And so the other analogy is like, you're not really cleaning if you just sweep, if you sweep your floors and you just move the dirt and you sweep it out of one room and put it in the other. You haven't cleaned anything, you've really just moved it around, and that's what HVAC is doing today. So one of the things that I also want to call out, we talked about bathrooms, right? So this is actually a computer model that architects use to design buildings and the airflow within it. And this is actually a women's restroom that has 6 toilets in it. And each of these toilets are flushing. And what you're seeing here in that red cloud is the cloud that emerges out of a toilet after it's flushed. It is called a plume. So this is a lovely toilet plume. And so what you're seeing here is obviously parts per million, and the red is not good, right? So when you're in shared environments, unlike at home where your toilet maybe has a lid on it, when you're in shared environments in a school and an office, many of those toilets don't have lids. And so whatever's going in the toilet and you flush it, generally it's a pretty powerful flush and things are being emitted back into the air that you are breathing or the person that is coming in after you is going to be breathing, right? So this is a really big issue. that we see. What happens when you add air purification, and in this case we've added air purification right over the stalls, you see that it's an immediate containment and capturing of the airborne particulate right away, and then introducing purified air into the back into the bathroom. And I'll say, guys, that all of this is represented with HVAC. So when we've done the modeling here, you can see here that HVAC just is not effective at being able to remove the particulates and the issues that are in the air. So think about what's in that cloud. It's going to be germs, it's viruses, it might be some fecal matter. It also is going to be odor that's there. So again, a high area of contaminant that we want to make sure that we're addressing. So with that being the case, one of the things we want to do is we want to be able to clean where it's needed the most. So as you think about your own organization, where are the people mostly gathering? And where are they in the smallest type of areas? It may be a conference room. It can be a restroom, a bathroom. If you're in a school, certainly schools have the most people per square footage because we're putting a lot of kids in classrooms and there's a lot of people within a very small area. Conference rooms, same deal. Break rooms, cafeterias, and also locker rooms. So these are all places where, again, just a fraction of the many places where you might want to start thinking about where to clean first. What we say is, as you're looking to improve the indoor air quality within your organization, looking at something like AeraMax Professional, a commercial grade air purifier, you want to be able to remove 99.9% of allergens and viruses, and you're doing that through using filtration that is very common to hospitals. Hospitals use HEPA-like filtration because that's capturing the smaller particles that you might find in germs and allergens. In addition, you're not just going to capture allergy and asthma related triggers, but you're going to get rid of odors, you're going to get rid of VOCs. And the great thing about it is this technology also is automatic, so you basically set it and forget it, right? There's no need to manually turn it up, turn it down. It is going to detect the room's environment and its occupancy, and it's going to increase and decrease its performance accordingly. And a range of purifiers that can go up from 300 to about 1,400 square feet. So you can really kind of custom match based on your spaces. And what you want to be able to do is exchange your air about 5 times an hour. And that's what these are really designed to do. And what that means is you put one of these in a room, it is going to run the volume of air within that room up to 5 times per hour, which is a high level of cleanliness and satisfaction that takes place. What you want to be able to do to achieve that 99 is you're going to want to have multiple stage filtration. The pre-filter is going to capture the larger particles. You want to get the carbon filtration, which is going to absorb the VOCs and the odors, and then the True HEPA filter, which is going to capture the smaller microns that take place there. Okay, you guys may have heard of like ionization. What that does is actually breaks down bacteria and viruses to just give another level of cleanliness there. So we actually have 3 lines of air purifiers, from smaller, slimmer items for smaller offices, conference rooms, things like that, up to bigger units on the 3 and 4 that can just do larger spaces. So what's great about it, as we talked about before, this is about we're cleaning with 0 use of chemicals, right? So we're not adding any more chemicals, any more aerosols into the environment. You're cleaning the air that is already in that building and removing the impurities. They're also extremely energy efficient. I think the cost is about $12 a year in electricity of even being used here. Constant cleaning. And the other side of this is as you're capturing allergens, as you're capturing bacteria and viruses and odors, you're also capturing the airborne dust. And less dust and less germs means less surface cleaning, right? So less things out of there. So with that, guys, I know I went through a lot really quickly here, but I wanted to just kind of highlight to you, as we think about indoor air quality and we think about those that suffer from asthma and allergies, there's a lot of people out there that have asthma and allergies. Knowing the triggers now, I think, is the first step of starting to create solutions. And what we identify is that providing clean indoor air for people is going to be the best way to avoid those asthmatic and allergy triggers, but it also has benefits of removing things like the flu, the common cold, norovirus, in addition to things that just make your environment dirty, like dust and things of that nature. So with that, ended a little bit early here, which is okay. That gives us a little bit of time for Q&A at this point in time. So I'll hand it back to Ann.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you, everyone, for listening in. Yes, we do have several questions, and I encourage our listeners to continue to send in any questions that you do have. So yes, Jeff, you had talked about the particles and contaminants and other items that your product removes. So can you explain how a facilities person might be able to measure the particles or contaminants or the quality of their air beforehand, before maybe putting an AeraMax in, and then understanding, the improvement that it has made? Do you have any of those before and after kind of examples, or what that process entails?
Yeah, what we do is there's absolutely an opportunity to measure what we use in using a particle counter. And what that does is it's a small little handheld device that we use that basically takes in your air, and it'll measure the amount of particles and actually the size of the particles. And so the size of the particles, it gives us an indication of the type of particle it is. So smaller particles are generally things like viruses and germs, and larger ones can be dust and allergens. And so what we can do is actually take measurements of basically the amount of particles that are in the air. And what's interesting about that is it's unseen to the human eye. So you may look in your environment and say, oh, it seems like our we've got clean air. But how do we really know? And so we take a particle count measurement, and we can do that before, and we can take that in different areas of a facility. And then secondly, what we'll do is kind of do afters. And so as we install, or as we have air purification running, we can do pre and posts. And what we find kind of on average is that we're able to clean and reduce the amount of air particles in the facility on average by about 70 to 75%, which is 70% less flu virus, 70% less allergens, 70% cleaner. And so those are pretty significant improvements. But yeah, we use a particle counter.
Great, thank you. And for UV purification, can you comment on UV purification? I don't know if your product does use that, but we'll have someone asking if you can comment on that either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, UV purification. There are some UV components out there right now, and what UV does is basically, as air is blown over a UV bulb, what the UV is going to do is damage. The intention is that it's going to damage the virus or bacteria that is exposed to on the UV light. The reason why we don't go with UV is a couple of reasons. One is the level of effectiveness. Generally, you need a pretty long exposure to that UV light in order to kill or damage those particles. Two, UV light does not capture the dirtiness of the air. So for something that's already dead, let's call it, like dust, it doesn't do anything to capture that. It's just exposing your dust to UV light now. And then third, there's the exposure to UV from a human standpoint is not good, and so we don't like running that risk. We use the HEPA filtration, which captures all of that. So whether or not it's dust or bacteria or a virus, it's going to be captured in the HEPA and not reintroduced back into an environment. So yeah, that's why we elect to use HEPA filtration to capture rather than UV, because UV has been it's questionable in terms of its effectiveness.
Thank you. And have the AeraMax units been tested in relation to documenting that they do or do not generate any ozone? The question here refers to ozone production is a problem with some ionization in air cleaners. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And yeah, this has actually been tested. We are a big partner of the California Air Resource Board, which is one of the most stringent tests of measuring any emission of ozone. So yeah, ionizers, do some of the real powerful ionizers give off ozone, and we do not. So we're safe there. On the ozone side, and it's a very common question, and we've got documentation, third-party confirmation of that as well. It's actually part of our standard process, and we're safe.
Great, thank you. And while we're on the product topic, I just wanted to quickly ask this question about the filters that you had shown on one of your slides toward the end. Can you just comment on the schedule of maintenance, I guess I should say, in terms of the filters? What does that demand of the facilities staff?
Yeah, exactly. And we really designed this in mind for the facility staff. The last thing we know you want to do is be able to go and have to change out things every so on a frequent basis. These are designed to need to be changed out once a year, and so that's really the schedule. And again, that's on an average environment. So if you've got a highly polluted environment, um, it may take a little bit more frequency there, but on average, you're going to find only need to change this out once a year.
Great, thank you. And looks like we have one last question, unless we get a few more in, asking about the role of carpet in the facility. If you have any insight on that. The question or statement is, I've heard it acts as a filter to remove pollutants and allergens from the air until they can be removed via vacuuming or deep cleaning. Does that complement the air purification system, or have you seen any kind of relationship between that in your work?
Yeah, actually, we've seen carpeting, and that's a question around carpeting, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so what we've actually seen is most of the carpeting being a contributor to the airborne contaminants that are in the air, carpet fibers being emitted, and actually being a way of when carpet is agitated as people are walking around, it's actually kicking up many of the dirt that falls in the carpeting, but also carpeting itself. And so when we do a lot of measurements, we'll find a lot of carpet analysis and carpet fibers that are happening. So we do not see carpeting at all as being a way to filter or capture and improve your indoor air quality. And in fact, it's actually one of the contributors of the contaminant at times.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, well, that seems like it's all the questions we have, and I want to thank you for the presentation.
Excellent. And yeah, one thing to notice, if anyone does need a copy of the presentation, or if they have any additional follow-ups, they certainly can reach out directly to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Jeff. And thank you to AeraMax Professional for sponsoring this webinar, and of course to all our attendees for listening in today and for sharing your questions and interest. A recording of the webinar will also be available online at facilityexecutive.com, as well as on the AeraMax website, and that's aeramaxpro.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.